This video has been created by the diabetes team at the Rotunda Hospital. My name is Naomi Hastings. I'm one of the dietitians here in the diabetes service. This session will discuss the dietary management of type 1 and type 2 diabetes during pregnancy. During your pregnancy, you will meet with the dietitian regularly, and at a minimum, you'll meet with the dietitian once each trimester. We will help you to ensure you're meeting your nutritional requirements for the key nutrients in pregnancy, advise you on carbohydrate-containing foods, and also help you in understanding your blood glucose or sensor patterns. A healthy, balanced diet will help to provide the nutrients that both you and your growing baby will need. Food is broken down into different nutrients. So the three basic nutrients are protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are the foods that are going to have the largest effect on our blood glucose level. All of these foods break down into glucose or sugar after we eat them, which is normal. When I say carbohydrates, what foods do we think of? Oftentimes people think of sugar and cakes, but actually carbohydrates are found in lots of the foods that we eat. And even though you have diabetes, you still need to eat carbohydrates to get enough energy for both you and your baby. Guidelines recommend that you need about 175 grams of carbohydrate per day during pregnancy. Many of you will already be familiar with carbohydrate and the carbohydrate content of foods, but these next few slides will act as a refresher for your carbohydrate education. So where does glucose come from? So we've broken carbohydrates down into different types. We have starches, natural sugars, and free sugars. In the image at the bottom, the little yellow circles are glucose, the green arrows are insulin, and the scissors are the digestive enzymes which break down our glucose when we eat them in our gut. When we eat food, as I mentioned, the digestive enzymes are going to break the carbohydrates down into single glucose or sugar molecules, and then we need insulin to help get the glucose or carbohydrate from our blood into our body cells so that we can then use it as energy. So starchy carbohydrates are foods like bread, rice, and pasta. These are more complex carbohydrates. So as you can see from the diagram, there are many links holding these yellow circles together. This means that the digestive enzymes are working on these foods for longer to turn them into glucose. So therefore the glucose very slowly drips into the blood, and this is helpful in effectively managing your blood glucose levels. We want to try to include these foods in our diet, and in a few minutes we'll take a closer look at the types of starchy carbohydrates that we recommend trying to include. Natural sugars then, these are found naturally in food like fruit, milk, and yogurt. So fruit contains fructose, milk and yogurt contain lactose. As you can see from the diagram, there is only one link holding the little yellow circles together. That means that the digestive enzymes can work quite quickly on these foods to turn them into glucose. But these foods contain essential nutrients, so we should try to include them in the diet. We just need to be careful about which ones we choose and the volume or the amount of these foods that we choose. The third type then are our free sugars, and these are found naturally in food like honey, soft drinks, and sweets. And like the natural sugars, these break down into glucose quickly. However, some of these foods don't have essential nutrients, like our soft drinks and sweets, so they're not considered important for healthy eating. Juices and smoothies also contain free sugars. So because these are broken down quickly, you're recommended to try to limit or avoid these foods, as they will result in a huge amount of glucose entering your blood very quickly, meaning that your blood glucose levels are going to rise quickly after eating these foods. Fat, protein, vitamins, and water are the other nutrients that we find in food. Oils and butters are 100% fat, so when we eat them, they don't break down into glucose, so they're not considered carbohydrate containing essentially. But it is important that you make heart healthy choices with these products. So like trying to choose olive oil, rapeseed oil or canola oil. Our protein foods like meat, fish, eggs, nuts, and cheese, these don't break down into glucose either. So it's recommended to try to choose lean and high quality meat and reduced fat cheese. Salad and vegetables on the main provide us with water, vitamins, and minerals. And again, we don't generally need to include these as part of our carbohydrate count at meals because the carbohydrate is released very slowly. And all of these foods may be useful to include as additional snacks if you're hungry, and also they can be used to bulk up your meal time because they aren't going to require insulin because they don't turn into glucose. Eating regular meals is very important when you have diabetes. So try to ensure that there's 4 to 5 hours between your main meals. And this is particularly important if you're taking a quick-acting insulin, which is active for 4 to 5 hours. And then in between those meals, you can take 2 to 3 small snacks if you need. And try to include starchy carbohydrate at each meal because this is going to help to give you a steady supply of energy and help to control your blood glucose levels. It's also important to try to avoid long gaps between your meals, and it's likely as you move through your pregnancy that you will need to take snacks in between your meals to help prevent low blood sugars 2 to 3 hours after your meals. The dietitian and the diabetes midwife will talk you through this when you meet with them. It is important to consider both the type and the amount of carbohydrate that you're including at your meal times, and we'll talk in a lot more detail about portion sizes shortly. And you may need to take a small bedtime snack before you go to bed if you're taking insulin at bedtime. And also it's very important that you take this snack if your blood sugar is less than 5 before going to bed, as it can help to prevent a low blood sugar level overnight. Again, the diabetes midwife and dietitian will discuss this with you. If you are taking fixed amounts of insulin with your meal times, then it's very important to try to include a similar amount of carbohydrate at each meal on every day. And this is going to help to establish a pattern to your blood glucose readings and also prevent low blood sugar readings and high blood sugar readings. If you're using insulin to carbohydrate ratios, so if you're carbohydrate counting, then it's very important that you are weighing out your food and being very accurate about your carbohydrate counting. And this will help the diabetes team to best adjust your insulin to manage your blood sugar readings. If you're taking too much carbohydrate for your insulin dose, this can lead to high blood sugar readings. And if you're taking too little carbohydrate for your insulin dose, this can lead to low blood glucose readings. So that's why taking a similar amount of carbohydrate is so important. The type of carbohydrate we eat is important because it determines how quickly a food is going to rise your blood glucose level. Carbohydrate-containing foods are broken down into glucose at different rates. The glycemic index is a measure of how quickly glucose is released from a food and into your blood. So this is also termed as slow-release carbohydrates and fast-release carbohydrates. Unprocessed carbohydrate foods here on the left-hand side are low in sugar and high in fiber, and these have a low glycemic index value, meaning they release glucose more slowly. Choosing these foods will help in managing your blood glucose levels because they're broken down slowly, so it's going to be helpful in managing your blood glucose levels 1 hour after you've eaten. Try to choose these foods at most of your meals, so examples would include whole grain bread or granary bread, rye crackers or oat cakes, cereals like shredded wheat and jumbo porridge oats, and certain fruit like apples and pears. Page 7 in your diabetes booklet that you will receive from the dietitian or diabetes team contains a full list of lower glycemic index or slow release foods. On the right hand side then we have fast-release carbohydrates or high glycemic index foods. These carbohydrates turn into glucose very quickly. and this produces a faster and a higher rise in our blood glucose levels. They tend to often be more processed foods and that are higher in sugar, fat, and salt. So try to limit or avoid these foods and insofar as possible. So examples of fast release carbohydrates are on page 8 in your booklet and would include white bread, cream crackers, a lot of breakfast cereals, and certain fruit like bananas and pineapples, for example. So not only is it important to choose the right type of carbohydrate, it's also important to choose the right amount of carbohydrate. So page 11 in your diabetes booklet has a full list of food portion sizes. To help you to manage your blood glucose levels, we recommend to aim to spread your carbohydrate intake over several meals and snacks, and it's very important that you're consistent with the amount of carbohydrate each day. I mentioned earlier, as a general guide, you will need about 175 grams of carbohydrate, or 11 to 12 choices from page 11 in your booklet is recommended to ensure that you meet the energy needs for both you and your baby. The dietitian, when you meet with them, will provide you with more detailed advice, but in general, we recommend choosing 1 or 2 carbohydrate choices or 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate at breakfast. Try not to include fruit at breakfast time. At lunch and dinner, we recommend choosing 3 to 4 carbohydrate choices, so 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate. And at evening meal, we recommend choosing 1 carbohydrate choice or 15 grams of carbohydrate. Most women find that they're unable to tolerate greater than 60 grams of carbohydrate at a meal without causing a high blood glucose level, despite adjusting your insulin. Greater than 60 grams of carbohydrate at your meal is going to mean that you need larger doses of insulin to help to prevent blood glucose rise 1 hour after the meal. But taking larger doses of insulin at the meal times can then result in a low blood sugar 2 to 3 hours after the meal. So the dietitian and diabetes team will discuss this with you. They will also discuss with you how to manage insulin with snacks. But one thing that's important is try to ensure that your snacks are taken 2 hours before your main meal. And you may be advised not to take insulin with your snacks, but this will be individualized for you. There are different ways that we can estimate the amount of carbohydrate that's in your food. So some people will have completed structured carbohydrate counting education. So for example, Daphne or Berger. So you may be very familiar with carbohydrate counting. Other people may have done carbohydrate education with a dietitian. But the most common ways to estimate the amount of carbohydrate in your foods is using the carbohydrate counting list on page 11 in your booklet, which contains a full list of carbohydrate choices or 15 grams of carbohydrate portions. Food labels is another way, so weighing the food and reading labels. This is the most accurate way to carbohydrate count, and we would encourage you to weigh your food during pregnancy. And just remember, if you're reading labels, low sugar on a label is less than 5 grams of sugar per 100 gram. The third way is to use like books or smartphone apps. So for example, Carbs and Cals is one example, and it has images of different portion sizes. So it can be a really useful guide, for example, if you're eating out. I suppose what's also important is to check the ingredients on labels too and try to avoid sugar, glucose, maltose, dextrose, fructose and syrup. These are all other words for added sugars, so just something to watch out for. So to help you to understand portion sizes, we've also developed this picture guide here, but refer to the list of carbohydrate choices in your booklet. So each of the examples that we have here refer to 15 grams of carbohydrate or 1 carbohydrate choice. Remember, as a general rule, we recommend choosing 1 to 2 carbohydrate portions at breakfast and then 3 to 4 carbohydrate choices at both lunch and evening meal, and then 1 carbohydrate choice at your snack times. So looking here at starchy carbohydrates, 1 slice of whole grain bread has the same amount of carbohydrate as 2 Ryvita crackers, which is the same amount as 100 grams of cooked new potatoes, or 50 grams of cooked whole wheat pasta. So for example, if I said you wanted to include 2 starchy carbohydrates at your lunch, you might choose 2 slices of brown or whole grain or seeded bread, and each slice would be 1 carbohydrate portion. Or you might want to choose 100 grams of cooked whole wheat pasta, with each 50-gram portion being 1 portion of carbohydrate. So hopefully this will make a little bit more sense in a few minutes when we talk through some sample meal plans. As a general rule of thumb, 2 starchy carbohydrate portions is the same size as 1 fist or 1 cup measure of cooked rice, pasta, or noodles or couscous. What some women do to make things easier is weigh out 100 grams of each of these foods when cooked, compare it to their fist, and so that they can use their fist as a hand measure. However, the most accurate measure of weighing your food portions is using a weighing scales, and this will be strongly encouraged throughout your pregnancy. Weighing foods and reading food labels is definitely the most accurate way of estimating the carbohydrate content of your foods. So we would encourage you at the beginning of your pregnancy to start weighing out the foods and become really familiar with your portion sizes. It's particularly important to weigh your foods if you are carbohydrate counting, and this will help us to ensure that the insulin doses and the ratios that have been given to you are correct. So when looking at a food label, you are going to look at the total amount of carbohydrate rather than just the of which sugars amount. I did mention that if you are looking at the of which sugars amount, this just helps you to determine if it is a low, medium, or high source of sugar, and try to choose low sugar products where possible, less than 5 grams of sugar per 100 gram. The total carbohydrate amount then on the label is going to be listed per 100 gram, but they may also give you a suggested serving size. So if you eat the suggested serving size that's on the packet, then you simply just need to read the carbohydrate content off the label. If you're eating a different serving size than what's recommended on the packet, then you will need to weigh your serving size and calculate the carbohydrate content. So this is how you would do that. You would, the carbohydrate content would be the carbohydrate content of the food per 100 gram divided by 100 and then multiplied by the weight that you're going to take. So for example here, if the weight of the food portion is 250 grams and we can see that it's 9 grams of carbohydrate per 100 gram, what the calculation that we would do here would be 9 divided by 100 and then multiplied by 250, which is the portion you're going to take. So that would give you 22.5 grams of carbohydrate in your portion of food. As we saw in the earlier slide, slower release fruit turns into glucose slowly. Faster release fruit turns into glucose more quickly. So try to choose the slow release fruit like apples, oranges, pears, kiwis, berries, and these are going to be more beneficial in helping you to manage your blood glucose levels. So it is recommended to try to have 2 to 3 portions of fruit per day and then try to include loads of vegetables as well. We know that fruit contains the natural sugars called fructose, so for that reason we recommend only eating 1 portion of fruit at a time. Having more than 1 portion might lead to too much glucose entering your body and causing your blood sugar levels to be high. In the morning, there is another hormone called cortisol that can work against your insulin. So generally, we don't recommend taking fruit at breakfast time. And we recommend that you try to avoid juices and smoothies and dried fruits because these are free sugars that turn into glucose very quickly. So in terms of a carbohydrate portion size, 1 medium piece of fruit like an apple or an orange or a pear would be one choice, or 15 grams of carbohydrate. For the smaller fruit, like plums, mandarins, and kiwis, it would be 2 smaller fruit would be a portion or 15 grams of carbohydrate. And then for berries, it would be a handful or a cup of berries would be the correct portion size. And then for vegetables, most salad and green vegetables are very low in carbohydrates, so you're recommended to enjoy these freely. However, peas, beans, lentils, chickpeas do contain some carbohydrate that we need to be mindful of. So if you're having more than half a cup of these foods in the meal, you may want to slightly reduce your portion size of the other starchy carbohydrates. So if you're carbohydrate counting, you might want to consider them as one carbohydrate choice, or about 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrate. When it comes to dairy, then milk and yogurt contain carbohydrate. They naturally contain lactose, which breaks down into glucose and can rise our blood sugar levels. So one glass of milk or one pot of yogurt would each be one carbohydrate choice. We recommend trying to choose 3 to 5 portions of dairy or calcium-rich foods every day. Try to choose low-fat milk, plain, natural, or no added sugar or diet yogurts. Cheese is also a dairy product. It contains calcium, but we don't need to carbohydrate count it. If you're having one glass of milk or a milky coffee, then consider that as a carbohydrate portion, or about 10 grams of carbohydrate. Whereas if you're having a small dash of milk in your tea, you don't need to count it. There won't be enough glucose in a dash to really impact on your blood glucose levels. It's more difficult to decide what yogurt to eat. One pot of plain or natural yogurt is about 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrate. The no added sugar and diet yogurts are also an option, but it is going to be a good idea to look at the label of those foods to make sure that they are low sugar, so that they don't have a big impact on your blood glucose levels. Protein-rich foods like your meat, fish, chicken, eggs, cheese, and your legumes, these are very important for pregnancy, and they help to support baby's growth and development. It's also helpful to include these foods as eating protein at the same time as carbohydrate at your meals and snacks helps to meet your nutritional needs, but also helps to slow down the release of carbohydrate foods. So pairing your protein with carbohydrates can be helpful if you're finding it difficult to manage your blood sugar levels 1 hour after the meals. You can use the sample meal plan on page 13 and 14 in your booklet, and also the carbohydrate counting list on page 11 in your booklet to help you to plan your meals. So here we just have some suggestions, but the meals should be adjusted to suit your individual needs. So for breakfast, all of the examples above equate to about 30 grams of carbohydrates. So for example, 1 shredded wheat, or 30 to 40 grams of all bran sticks with 150 to 200 mLs of milk, or 40 grams of porridge jumbo oats made on water, plus you could have eggs or an omelette, something that's carbohydrate free. 30 grams of the jumbo oats if you're using milk, because milk would be considered a carbohydrate portion. 1 slice of whole grain toast plus 1 pot of diet yogurt. 2 slices of whole grain toast plus an egg or cheese or avocado or meat or tomatoes. Or the last example here, we have 100 grams of low sugar baked beans. So consider that as a carbohydrate choice, plus 1 slice of whole grain toast. We generally recommend limiting breakfast to 30 grams of carbohydrate because hormones in the morning time can make managing your blood glucose levels more difficult than after other meals. Some people find that eating 2 carbohydrate choices at this meal is difficult to manage your 1 hour reading. So what some people do is eat a smaller meal, like maybe 1 carbohydrate choice only, and then take a mid-morning snack to make sure that they're still getting in all of the nutrition that they need. At lunch and evening meal, you can aim for 3 or 4 of any of the choices from page 11. So again, make up your own individualized meal plan. But here's some examples of what equates to 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate. So one example is a garlic and ginger stir fry with tofu or prawns or vegetables, and 150 grams of cooked egg noodles. That would be about 45 grams of carbohydrate. Or 100 grams of cooked rice, 1 cup, with a homemade chicken curry using spices and tinned tomatoes or passata, plus a glass of milk. That example would be about 45 grams of carbohydrate. Or one brown bread sandwich with chicken salad plus an apple plus a yogurt, that would be 60 grams of carbohydrate. Or one whole grain wrap or pita or chapati with falafel or halloumi, plus salad plus soup. That example would be about 60 grams of carbohydrate. And the final example would be 150 grams or 1.5 cups of cooked pasta. You can use pesto as a sauce, your roasted vegetables plus some cheese, plus 2 small mandarins. That example would be about 60 grams of carbohydrate. In between the meals, then you can choose one snack in between each meal. So some examples of a snack, and we've tried to pair all of these snacks with protein because we mentioned protein helps to slow down the release of the carbohydrates. So 2 Ryvita crackers with some cheese and olives, 3 oatcakes with some hummus, a pot of yogurt and some berries. You could also add some nuts, a glass of milk with a handful of nuts, a piece of fruit, maybe dipped in some nut butter or cream cheese, 1 slice of brown or whole grain or seeded bread with some meat or cheese or an omelette, or a small bag of popcorn with a handful of nuts or a couple of cubes of cheese. The dietitian will give you further advice on insulin and snacking. There are some other times that you will need to snack. So you need to snack if you're hungry in between your meals to help you to meet your nutritional needs. You'll also need to snack if your mealtime insulin is causing a low blood sugar reading 2 to 3 hours after the meal. Then the snack will help to keep the blood sugar reading up. If you take bedtime insulin and your blood glucose levels are less than 5, then it's a good idea to take one of these snacks. You must be 5 to drive, so your blood sugar should be 5 or above if you're heading out to drive. And you also may need to snack if you've increased physical activity. So whether it's planned or unplanned, you may need to have a snack, and we recommend checking your blood sugars before, during and after exercise. You should try to keep consistent with your snacking from day to day and make sure that your snacks don't contain any more than 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrate. You'll be advised as to whether or not you should take insulin with your snacks. There are actually loads of nice recipes and meal ideas available on the Rotunda website. So we have the link here, rotunda.ie/diabetes. So there's recipes like veggie curries, fajitas, stir fry recipes, burrito bowl, lasagnas, mac and cheese, salad recipes. And also at the back of that, which is really helpful, is some dressing ideas and sauces that are suitable. So definitely something that's worth checking out. If you're admitted to the hospital during your pregnancy, whether it's for blood glucose stabilization or for another reason, you will usually meet with the dietitian and the diabetes midwife. It is very important if you're in the hospital that you continue to eat a similar amount of carbohydrate at your meals and snacks, because this will help us to best understand your insulin requirements. The dietitian will advise you how much carbohydrate to aim for at each meal, but the amount of carbohydrate in each food item on the diabetes hospital menu will be given to you. So all of the food here is weighed out and we have the carbohydrate content of it, which we can give to you to help you to plan your meals and snacks. And you'll also be offered the snacks in between your meals and also before bed if needed. And there's always snacks available on the ward. So for example, if you needed a snack after treating a hypo, that would be available to you as well. So just to run through some important nutrients for pregnancy and the supplements that we recommend. So firstly, folic acid. This is important as it can help to reduce the incidence of conditions of the baby's spine. So for example, spina bifida and other neural tube defects. So because you have pre-existing diabetes, you'll be recommended to take a daily supplement of 5 milligrams of folic acid until week 12 to 14 of your pregnancy. You will need a prescription for this, so the diabetes team will be able to provide you with this if you require it. After 12 to 14 weeks, then you can continue to take a 400 microgram folic acid supplement for the rest of your pregnancy, as folic acid also helps with red blood cell formation. Vitamin D, and this helps your body to absorb calcium. So you should take a 10 microgram vitamin D supplement, or you could take a pregnancy multivitamin that contains the 10 micrograms of vitamin D in it. Calcium then is needed to help with baby's bone development and muscle function, and calcium also helps in regulating blood pressure. So aim to eat 3 to 5 servings of dairy or milk alternatives each day. Ideally, these should be low fat, and with cheese, recommend avoiding like unpasteurized or mold ripened cheeses. If you choose dairy alternatives, make sure that they're fortified so that you've got your nutrients added back in. Extra iron is needed for your blood and also for baby's development and stores. So iron-rich foods include red meat, chicken and fish. And some other sources of iron include beans, eggs, green vegetables, nuts and seeds. So try to make sure you're taking 2 to 3 pieces of fruit and plenty of vegetables each day, which has vitamin C and which helps to increase the absorption of iron from the vegetarian sources. Protein then helps to support a healthy pregnancy. It also helps us in managing your blood glucose levels when it's paired with carbohydrates. So aim to include a source of protein at all of your meals and snacks. So whether that be meat, fish, eggs, beans, cheese, lentils or nuts. And then also including healthy fats is important. So like your nuts, seeds, avocados and your plant oils. Try to avoid fast food and processed meats. Try to use healthier cooking methods like grilling and baking and steaming your food. It's also recommended to try to eat oily fish like salmon, mackerel and trout 1 to 2 times per week. Alternatively, you can take a fish oil supplement for omega-3, just not cod liver oil, and this can help to support brain development. It's also found in like soya, walnuts, rapeseed oil, pumpkin seeds, linseeds, but it's not as well absorbed from these sources. Weight loss during pregnancy is not recommended. It's very normal to gain weight during your pregnancy because of the growth of the baby and the placenta, and also because your blood volume increases. A healthy weight gain helps your uterus, your womb, and placenta and baby to grow. So gaining too much weight while pregnant can affect your pregnancy and labor and also baby's future health. And the amount of weight you need to gain from the second trimester onwards depends on your body mass index, which is a measure of your weight against your height, and that would have been taken at the start of your pregnancy or at your booking visit. And the BMI uses your height and weight to work out if you're in a healthy weight category. If your BMI is under 25, on average, you can expect to gain between 0.4 to 0.5 kilograms per week. And if you're underweight, you may need to gain more weight, which the dietitian will advise you around. If your body mass index is over 25, you can expect to have a slightly lower rate of weight gain of about 0.2 kilograms per week. As I mentioned, losing weight is not recommended. The best time to lose weight is before or after the pregnancy. And your weight will be monitored at your diabetes and clinic appointments as well. Once your baby is born, your insulin dose will be reduced immediately, and it'll reduce back to your pre-pregnancy insulin dose. Or if you weren't on insulin, the diabetes team will advise how your diabetes will be managed. Breastfeeding is best for both mum and baby, and there aren't any reasons why women with diabetes can't breastfeed. We know that breast milk contains antibodies, and that helps to protect baby from infection, and also can have lifelong benefits for baby, so helping to reduce their risk of developing diabetes, allergy, and being overweight or obese. Breastfeeding is also really beneficial for mum. It helps to manage your blood sugar levels and also helps you to lose weight that's gained during the pregnancy. We know that breast milk contains a sugar called lactose, so every time you feed your baby, you're going to lose some of that sugar. So for this reason, it can cause a low blood glucose level if you're taking insulin to manage your diabetes. So there will be some advice provided to you from the diabetes team after your pregnancy, but to help to avoid hypos if you're breastfeeding, it is important to test your blood glucose levels before and after each feed. It's a good idea to have a snack of 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrate before or during each feed without any insulin. And you may also need to reduce your insulin dose for the meal before or after your breastfeed. And discuss any insulin changes with the diabetes midwives on the wards after you have delivered your baby. Okay, so that's it. So thank you very much for your time. Of course, if you need any support, we are available to you. So we have all of our contact details here for the diabetes midwives and their email address, the dietitian. I would encourage you to check out the website and social media as well for recipes and for more information. So we have rotunda.ie/diabetes, and there's also a Twitter and an Instagram account as well. So best wishes with your pregnancy, and look forward to meeting you.